Good afternoon. What a day for all of Wintergreen. I thank each of you for being here for this celebration of Wintergreen's 50th anniversary, honoring the many who over these 50 years have and do treasure, care for, and love Wintergreen, especially those who, in largest measure, created Wintergreen and have been steadfast stewards of the dream, the vision of its becoming, all the great that it is for so many owners there and the resort guests and its employees and the citizens of Nelson County. I have long hoped and feel blessed to be here on its 50th anniversary in my 92nd year and 57th falling in love with the big survey, now Wintergreen. I'd like to share with you the way to a vision, a dream for the big survey becoming Wintergreen. With an exclusive 16-month listing on the big survey obtained in March 68, I was determined that it be sold only by our three-partner realtor firm, Virginia Landmark Corporation, into best of good hands and uses, and foreseeing months of work to that end, that all I was doing be kept totally confidential. By June, after 3 months of careful, thorough, detailed as possible exploration of its 11,000 or so acres, with my good friend George Vest, who is as best a guide as could be, I was really loving the big survey, really falling in love, and well into wondering, having had the best good fortune of 2 stays at Sea Pines Resort on Hilton Head Island, I was really into wondering its potential as a resort community. Next step for me, pursuing that idea, was the hope for the potential of a resort community. I realized the feasibility of a resort required it to be 4 seasons and a necessity to have as good skiing as possible. Leading me to learning all I could of the meteorology required of the big survey. So first I traveled to Banner Elk, North Carolina, to meet with Harry and Grover Robbins, developers of Beech Mountain, who openly shared with me the meteorological advantage of their mountain, which they thought would be a must for the big survey to meet. Begin my quest over the fall and winter of 68, 69 to determine whether skiing could be, which was essential, if the big survey could become a year-round resort of finest quality, a mountaintop island of culture and amenity and restoration and recreation within a sea of wildness and nature. Thus began the start to get a leg up on the meteorological likelihood of making sufficient snow for enough days and nights of skiing on most likely areas. This was a major undertaking throughout the fall, winter, into spring, involving guidance from Joel Myers, a young meteorologist who became the founder of AccuWeather. Installation, according to his directions, of recording thermographs at elevations of 3,400 and 2,400 to record temperatures, and weekly servicing of them throughout the winter into March, which was quite a challenge. Thorough investigation of water resources with the aid of a geologist, Brian Cooper, showed that ultimately would be required a major source of water, not from wells, which we were able to acquire some years later at the Boy Scout camp and its lake Barnacle. In January '68, I was able to obtain the services of Fred Rogers, mountain manager of Big Bromley Ski Area in Vermont, the only ski area with a southern exposure requiring snowmaking, who, with a week's study on site with me, plus travel to a comparison with Beech Mountain, Bryce's, Hot Springs, other ski areas, wrote a report supporting the feasibility of a ski area. Before the visit, while in Vermont, Fred Rogers told me he doubted the feasibility and thought I was going to be wasting his time, my money and my time for him coming down. But it turned out that his coming was a godsend. So, in mid-March 1969, with a full report with relevant maps, I made an appointment with my friend Jim Wheat, the man with the furthest reaching, clearest vision, and most entrepreneurial mind and outlook and temperament I knew, had ever known, would ever know, and surpassed as a pragmatic idealist, adventurer, and armed with all reports, quite a lot for a blind man to see. I arrived at his office. Wheat was intrigued, but before coming up for reconnaissance, he had others first take a look, as well as to read to him all the reports given to him. Emphasis: Wheat was blind. Finally, in late May, Jim Wheat and three of his most trusted associates came up for exploration, mostly of the ski and developable area. This visit was sufficient, along with multi-persons reviewing written matter, to recommend inviting three top land planners to do a reconnaissance, who came and each did a 2-day land reconnaissance, resulting in unanimous feasibility reports. And ultimately, that led to the purchase of the big survey in June by Jim Wheat and a group of his investors. The end.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Wintergreen Resort's 50th anniversary historical presentation. First, I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us on what should be a really special and memorable program. So thanks so much for taking time out of your day and joining us today. My name is Mark Glickman, and I served as Vice President of Marketing at Wintergreen from 1986 to 1998. And it's just always so great to be back at Wintergreen. This is a special place that gets inside of you and never leaves. And I feel lucky and blessed to have worked with all these people up here, many that are sharing the stage with me today. We share some special memories of our time together at Wintergreen that will forever connect us for the rest of our lives. So it's just been so great to see everyone again. I'm going to first introduce everybody that's here, and then we'll start by asking each person for one of their special memories from their stay at Wintergreen. We could probably fill up 90 minutes with any one of these people up here, but it's going to be my job as moderator to try to keep the timing under control. Unlike the Oscars and the Golden Globes, we don't have any music we can pump in if somebody's going to ramble on too long. So instead, I've asked Doug Coleman to start singing if anybody rambles on too long. I figure if that doesn't cut him short, nothing is. So let me first start by introducing the panel. I guess I'll start with you, Peter Farley, Ellen English, Gunter Muller, George Nicholas, L.F. Payne, Mary Buford, Doug Coleman, Jay Gamble, Tony Troy, Jay Roberts, John Coy, Tim Hess, Cecilia Faulkner Socia and Mac Faulkner, both joining us. And joining us by Zoom, we have Michael Donovan and Don Faulkner. We have a special treat to start things off, and though he couldn't be with us here today, we've been able to have our first guest join us by Zoom. And all you need to know about Don Faulkner is that without his vision, we wouldn't be here today, and there would be no Wintergreen. Working on farms and ranches with horses and cows is what guided Don's life. And when he knew he needed to learn something to do what he wanted to do, he graduated from Cornell's College of Agriculture and went to University of Virginia's Business School. So it should be no surprise that his vision for securing the big survey was to develop this spectacular outdoor resort. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Wintergreen's visionary, Don Faulkner. So Don, talk to us about what was the most difficult thing you had to learn in developing Wintergreen.
Meteorology. Meteorology.
Don, tell us the story about how when you brought the person who began the Weather Channel, a meteorologist at the time, to determine whether or not this land could support skiing.
Well, the meteorologist, the fellow who started AccuWeather, he was just graduated as a meteorologist, and within a few months, he started AccuWeather. But without him, I don't think there would be Wintergreen either, because he really did a job on helping us to figure out what we needed to have in order to figure out whether we could have skiing or not. And it was certainly clear to me early on, one, that there needed to be, the big survey needed to become a resort. And I thought it was essential that it be a 4-season resort, and that it would be necessary that we have skiing. And as it turned out, with Joel Meyer's help and others, we've got skiing. Okay, so I want to thank all of you all for being here today. And I got to thank the Lord or somebody that I'm here to be here on hand today, because I've been hoping for a long time that I'd live to see the 50th, and by God I have. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for all of you all being here today. And I'm ready to do whatever I'm supposed to do as time goes on.
Don, tell us about the person that was most helpful to you, that helped you accomplish what you did with Wintergreen.
Well, the first person that helped me was Margaret Garth, who ran Tuckahoe Tavern. And she put me in touch with some really important people right off, Max Campbell and George Vest particularly. George Vest was my constant companion over many years. He knew Wintergreen, he knew the big survey like the back of his hand. And the only time with him that I knew for sure where I was when I tripped over a benchmark, which was identified on the topo map I had. And George was surprised I knew where I was, because he'd never seen a benchmark or a topo map.
But Don, you had mentioned when we spoke earlier in the week about some of the dangers you encountered when you were developing Wintergreen. Why don't you give us one or two of those?
Well, I guess the greatest danger was when I was involved in a knife fight. And I don't mean that I had a knife, because I didn't, but the other person did, and was extremely angry with me unjustifiably, also the person was drunk, and also the person just kind of had a habit of being mean and evil. Anyway, fortunately, I was struggling to get the knife and to not get knifed, and ultimately and fortunately, this person's spouse came in and separated us and did away with the person. So that was one. The other really thing that took as much courage as I could muster was having to climb to the top of a tree, top it at the right at the right height above the ground, which I remember I think was 55 feet, but I could be wrong on that. And then to go through a procedure to attach to the top of that tree with 3 bolts a 10 or 12-foot pipe, 2-inch pipe, on which was an aero monitor, a wind speed thing to determine wind speed. And we had 3 locations for that. And I was the one to climb the tree. And that, well, I got over my fear, but that was pretty scary at times. Because when we had ropes attached to it, once I got it bolted in one place, had ropes attached to it to get it vertical, and that was really tricky. And once it got vertical, then I'd drill a hole and put another bolt in. And the only funny thing about that was at one point, my pretty constant companion, George Best, who was just a wonderful, wonderful help to me and a great friend, he yelled out, "Stop, stop, that rope's hooked to my ladder." And so the whole thing was kind of amusing once we got through it.
Don, we're gonna get back to you in a little bit, but we really appreciate you being here and joining us today. So let's have a big hand for Don. I'd like to introduce L.F. Payne. L.F. served as Wintergreen's development manager from 1973 to 76 and was the president of Wintergreen Development Incorporated from 1976 to 1988. LF, without your solid leadership and commitment, Wintergreen would never have become the success that it became and it is today. So thank you for that. It was an honor and privilege to work with you. Elif, in your many years at Wintergreen from 73 to 1988, you had the opportunity to participate in many firsts for this area. Maybe you could talk about some of the firsts that you experienced, from the ski area to the golf course and everything else.
So thank you very much, Mark, and thank you all very much for being here. It's a real honor for me to be back at Wintergreen with Susan and seeing so many wonderful friends that are here, both on the dais and in the audience. And before, I do want to talk about your comment, your question, and that is, I'll tell you a little story about early ski in the ski area. And it's a bit of a metaphor for Wintergreen. But first, I just wanted to comment, as I have been here today and looked around and seen all that's happening at Wintergreen, I'm just so very, very proud of all that everybody in this room have done to make this community the kind of community that it is today. And there's really, I think, as I've thought about it, the big news, I guess, of Wintergreen is that as we started this building, after Don had done all the planning and meteorological work and so forth and acquired the land, we began with certain, I guess we'd call them either values or principles, and 2 of them, I think, are were particularly important. I've wanted to just mention those before I tell you the story about skiing. One of them was that we recognized that we were going to be building skiing and golf and tennis and many utility systems, and that there would be a lot in restaurants and clubs, and a lot that we would bring to this property and to Wintergreen. But I think first and foremost, we recognized that Wintergreen was a very, very special place. And that what we needed to do was to find ways not to detract from, but to enhance Wintergreen and to, as the book title is, For the Love of the Land, to love this land and to be good stewards of it. And so this was how we started this some 50 years ago. And I mention this today because I don't think it's any different today, and that all of us collectively subscribe to that same principle or that same value. And the second, and I guess as evidence of, well, what does that really mean? We started Wintergreen with a 13,000 acre master plan that had been approved for us to do our development. Today, we have developed roughly 4,000 of those 13,000 acres, and 9,000 acres then are going to be permanently open and left as they were when we first came here, or when anybody in this country ever came to this part of Nelson County. And that the 4,000 that has been developed are full of green spaces and trails and parks and so forth. And so I think, again, we should take pride in the fact that 50 years on, we've done a good job. And you'll hear from Doug and others, there's more to be done, but we've done a good job because of, again, the people at this dais and the people in the room. Secondly, and I think really importantly, is we determined that we should be part of the bigger community. There was some talk early on about, well, we could be a community where we could have a gated community, and this could be very exclusive, and people would build very expensive homes and so forth. And we decided that really the way that we could make the greatest contribution and have this place be the best place it could be would be for it to be open and enjoyed by more people, and that we would reach out in the community, because the people who lived here in Nelson County, many of them, they had been living here for generations, and we represented change, and in some cases pretty scary change to them. And the way that we could best succeed as we moved ahead was to work on this together and not be at odds. And so we began hiring as many local people as we could find. And now there are literally generations of families who were in Nelson County when Wintergreen arrived, who have worked at and who would say wonderful things today if they were here. So I point this out because I think these two principles that were guiding principles as we started are two principles that everybody here thinks are important ones today. And hopefully there'll be principles that will guide the community as it moves into the future. My story. So as Mark says, I was here for a lot of firsts. And as we're here in the ski season, I was recalling early skiing. And we were in the ski business. We'd done, I think, a good job of building the ski area. But one of the challenges we had was that in the marketplace, nobody knew how to ski. And it was like, we don't have a primary market that knows how to do and use the product that we're trying to sell. So how do you fix that? And again, I say this as a metaphor because there's so many things we could talk about at Wintergreen that were like this was, gee, this is a problem. How do we fix this? Well, this one, we did a number of things, including going to colleges and universities and having all the folks get engaged in teaching skiing. And we used to have, they would say, mixers here on Tuesday night where UVA and Sweetbriar and JMU and all these folks would come. And lots of young people got involved, and they got 1 credit hour for taking skiing. And so we did that. We contracted with some really talented people. Bruce Thompson, that's a familiar name to some of you. He now owns the biggest hotel in Virginia Beach. But Bruce wanted to bring skiers from particularly Tidewater to Wintergreen. And so we said, okay, Bruce, if you can demonstrate you can do this, bringing us skiers, we will give you an exclusive. Bruce Thompson brought 20 and 25 and 30 busloads of people here for skiing at a time when we desperately were looking at how is it we can do this and be successful. And then thirdly, and most importantly, we uniquely in the country decided we were going to teach people to ski differently. And it was a technique called the graduated length method, GLM. And there was a guy by the name of Cliff Taylor, who was a master of GLM, who we got to come to Wintergreen and bring GLM skiing. And the idea there was that you learn to ski not by being in a wedge and falling down all day, but you started on 50-centimeter skis, and you could stand up and maneuver. And when you got a little better at it, you can move to 75s and 100s and all the way up to 150s. And the experience from day one was a pleasant stand up and enjoy yourself kind of experience. I remember, though, going into the cafeteria shortly after we'd started this, and there was a line of people, and they were seemingly holding trays, getting ready to, and they were lined up, person. Then there was a gap, and a person, then another gap, and more people. And I went over to see what that was all about, and somebody had walked in and had on their GLM skis in the cafeteria line because they just gotten there, they put the skis on, they didn't want to take them off, and they thought they would be perfectly fine to have. So that was Wintergreen in its early days, and we were scrambling, if you will, trying to get people to ski. 2 years later, we have so many skiers coming to Wintergreen that we have to position ourselves down at the ski barn and tell people at 8:30 in the morning, I'm sorry, I know you've driven from Raleigh, North Carolina, and I know your family's in the car. I know they're excited about being here, but you can't ski today because we're totally full, and it's not safe if we allow any more people to come. And we were turning away so many people that the governor of North Carolina called the governor of Virginia. And the governor of Virginia called us and said, what's going on? The people in North Carolina are furious at Virginia for being so rude. And we explained our problem. The governor of Virginia then helped us out by sending the state police to that very site. We made up brochures that we would give to people with a coupon, come back when we're not busy, but also here's how you get to Massanutten, here's how you go to Monticello, here's how you can see the University of Virginia grounds, and here's some other things you can do, but you can't come and ski at Wintergreen today. So I say all that, again, as a metaphor of, here was a problem that confronted us, one that we found a way to solved it and did it well, and then moved on from there. And of course, we've been skiing ever since, and have done it very, very well. And I heard today for the first time, even in the snow tubing business, we're number 2 in the nation, I guess, in that business. So there's so much that's been accomplished in each and in many of our areas here at Wintergreen. The last thing I would say is there's just so much pride associated with being here with all of you and looking around and seeing this beautiful place. It's an amazing place, and seeing so many people here enjoying it. That's what this was all about. And I think we've had a wonderful 50 years. I'm thinking that the Wintergreen's best years, though, are still ahead of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, LF. Now I'd like to introduce Tony Troy. Tony was the vice president of WPI in 1984 and then president of WPI from 1985 to 1990, and also served as the president of the Wintergreen Nature Foundation for 3 years. And I just want to say, Tony's board here was my favorite board. He spoiled me for any other board I ever worked for before. He was a huge support to the management team, and just a quick little story. I did a snowmaking event in Chaco Slip in Richmond. And did one in 19th Street and DuPont Circle too, where we raised money for the Special Olympics and for the Sunshine Foundation. But Tony was the first guy to ever ski down Chaco Slip in Richmond. We did the promotion. We didn't know how it was going to work, but Tony was there with his support. I took a big deep breath because we had just built the ramp the night before in the middle of the night, and I didn't know if it was going to hold or not or how it was going to work. But thankfully, Tony's a strong skier, and he made it down Chaco Slip in one piece. But anyway, Tony, it's great to see you again. Tell us about one of the highlights that stands out in your memory of that time.
Well, Mark, first, not falling off that ramp. But let me digress a little and echo some of LF Payne and give a little background. It was formed, of course, 50 years ago. In '84, there was an effort by the homeowners to form Wintergreen Partners, Inc., essentially the resort, where homeowners would buy in. And I got involved representing, as an attorney, a group of dissidents who did not like the plan. Luckily, we found a tax flaw that the money being collected would have been taxed as ordinary income, not capital. Met with LF Payne and his group and straightened that out. And WPI was formed, and the next thing I knew, having not been at a meeting, LF called me, typical of LF, of bringing people together, and said, by the way, you're now vice president of WPI. We then, as indicated, became president for 5 years. Some of the good things we did, Skyline Pavilion, for example, which you all know, and that was built because we sold our wastewater treatment system to the Nelson County Sewer Authority, or Service Authority. By the way, they offered us more money than we were entitled to, and typical of LF and being the honest brokers, we took a lower amount, but we were still able to buy Skyline Pavilion. A couple other efforts we did, we gave the lot for $1, the land that the schoolhouse is on, or was on. It's now the community center next to the fire station in Stony Creek. So those are some of the highlights. And we had a wonderful time. Some of the shenanigans, however, were mainly Mark Glickman. But in order to get publicity, we had, I remember vividly, Willard Scott, the weatherman from the Today Show. He was there watching us make snow. Yul Gardner assured him that it was not grits, it was snow. He had the Mayer brothers here, the Olympic champions. He had me race them. I lost, they won. And then the one that I don't know how we got away with, but we got a lot of publicity that was widely accepted, that we were sending loads of dirt and we were going to raise the mountain to over 4,000 feet. And that got publicity and everything, despite the fact that it was on April 1st that we were giving that. So those are some of the highlights, and there are more, but I'll stop there and let the others.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. I'd like to introduce George Nicholas. George started working at Wintergreen in 1974 as the golf course superintendent responsible for the construction of the Devil's Knob Golf Course, and then became the director of planning and development in 1976, responsible for all aspects of design, engineering, and construction of the Mountain and Valley subdivisions, the condominiums, and commercial facilities. And as Mary so eloquently put it in her book about George, when you look at the total development of Wintergreen, there's very little that does not carry George's stamp of approval. But in addition to his development responsibilities, George played a key role in the startup where operations that are now a part of Wintergreen, everything from snowmaking to the fire and police departments and the utility company. George truly did it all. George, tell us a little bit about the early development of Wintergreen back in the 70s and some of the challenges you dealt with, like constructing a golf course on the mountain, which I've had numerous national golf writers say to me, you couldn't build that golf course today. It would cost $1 zillion and it would be logistically impossible. But George, and with the help of Ellis Maples and a lot of people, built a really special golf course that you're not going to find in too many places in the country anymore, ever. Take it away, George.
I'm going to do something now that's a little dangerous. I'm going to digress for just a second. This is dangerous. It is always dangerous to single out one person amongst a group. And while it's been pointed out that there are a number of people that are responsible for the development of this project, starting out with Don Faulkner and Jim Wheat, and many others, there is one person that I believe, had he not been here, we would not be here today, and that's L.F. Payne. He has, and I happen to be in a unique position to be a part of and see some of these things happen. But there were numerous times here when this project could have run totally off the rails. And when nobody else could kind of figure it out, LF was able to figure it out. And I had said in the book that he had quoted and said that over time there were those who rose to the occasion to deal with certain issues. And I said, LF always rose to that occasion. And I truly believe that. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And you can forward me the $20 later. Let me just tell you, I guess in what Dawn had said about a meteorologist, the toughest things that I dealt with here, or that we dealt with, we dealt with here collectively, was both meteorology and geology. And so we learned very quickly that, as I said, is what Mark pointed out, I came here in the fall of '74. This project actually began on the ground in the spring of '73. And a lot of planning had been done before that time. But of all the challenges that we faced, Mother Nature was probably the greatest. And over time, we learned that there's no fighting Mother Nature. And if you haven't been watching TV in the last couple of days, you should understand that as to what's happening in California. But, and which also was one of our primary concerns when we started Wintergreen. Of all the dangers that could happen here, fire was clearly the biggest single danger that existed here. And you can clearly see that as you see the TV coverage on what's happened in Palisades. But the thing that is unusual about, one of the things that's unusual about Wintergreen, there's a whole lot of them, is that it's an upside down mountain. And I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but most ski areas that you go to, you pull into the base lodge, get out of your car, go to the lodge, put your skis on, ride this lift up, ski back down. Not here. You got to figure out how to get to the top of the mountain, get out of your car, get your skis on, ski down, and then bring the lift back up. So who is it that figured out, Don Faulkner, that you could ski an area south of the Mason-Dixon line and you could figure out how to get to the top of a 3,800-foot mountain? I would like to know who figured that one out to begin with. But that created all kinds of problems. And the road coming up, the Wintergreen Drive that you've all driven on to get up here, was a feat in and of itself. And a man by the name of Bird LaPrade was primarily responsible for that. And it was a fairly archaic way of laying that road out. And in today's technology that we have with satellite LiDAR and things like that, where we have accurate topos, it would have been a cakewalk. But Doug Coleman had pointed out several times, it's kind of difficult to look back into history from today, and because you associate what you have today. We're all sitting here and it's very warm and it's nice, and you kind of think that this is the way that it was back then. Well, it wasn't. The things back in the early 70s were a little bit different. One thing, I'm going to guess that if I said to everybody in this audience or in this building, if those of you who have a cell phone, raise your hand. And my guess, almost every hand in this building would go up. Well, let me tell you, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have a telephone. What we had was right over here in the parking lot across from the Black Rock Market. We had a little dinky 2-room construction trailer with a ship-to-shore radio and a 12-volt battery. And if we wanted to call out of here, we went over there and we used the call sign and called up somebody that was an operator in the city in Lynchburg, and that person would patch us through. If I had to order a load of concrete from Allied Ready Mix in Waynesboro, they would patch me through and I could have conversation with them. All of the things that have been built up here had to be brought up here. And so all of the things that we had to go through in order to do that, and I say we had, when I came here, it was a beehive of activity. There were contractors from a number of different places. We had roads being built, we had water lines and sewer lines and electric lines being installed. We had a ski area, we had lift towers being installed, clearing being done, golf course under construction, water tanks being built, sewer treatment plant being built. It was a maze of things, and to coordinate all of that, and I don't take credit for that. LF was involved in that very clearly at the very beginning, from 73 up until the time that I got involved in it in 76. And it was amazing to me that we pulled this thing off, that the majority of the infrastructure of this community was done in that time frame with not real good conditions. But as I say, we figured out very quickly that the weather, when you asked to talk about challenges, the weather was one of the things that we had to deal with here. And you couldn't build up here, I'm sorry, in the wintertime. If you were going to work in the ground, if you were going to put in water and sewer lines, if you were going to build roads, you weren't going to do it in December, January, and February. Of course, if the ski season was bad, you might be able to do that. But the weather here dictated a lot of what we did here and how we did it. The reason that this mountain exists is because of rock. And we learned how to deal with rock. Every time that we turned around, we had to deal with rock. That's the reason the Devil's Knob is here. And somebody said, as I was complaining about all the rock and all the dynamiting we had to do, somebody said, well, why in the devil do you think they call it Devil's Knob? This thing, this is a tough environment, and it took tough people to do this. And it was a different time. And I thought about the caliber of people that were here. And I'm talking about the boots on the ground. I'm talking about these guys that were out here and getting it done. We came along here in a time period when the draft was enforced. We had a lot of military people. LF was military. Larry Rutherford was military. I was military. It was a who's who. You can name it down the line. And so that military training came into effect. I'm convinced that it had a lot to do with the grit that it took in order to build this place at the time. Now, having said all that, the things that had to be done here in order to make this thing work, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have telephone. I said that the electricity had to be brought from almost 12 miles away. And the Central Virginia Electric Co-op, who, if you have a house up here, you get a bill from them. They provide all the reason the lights are on right now. They were asked to build this line, which was well in excess of $1 million. And they'd never done any of this before. And there's a part of the book that tells about how that was done financially, and I won't get into that. But the difficulty that they ran into with what they had to do, they had never put in underground electric before. If you go to the valley, you'll see that the first sections of the valley that we did, Rose Valley Drive over to Lake Monica to Camping Ridge, you'll see that's overhead power in there. That was done in the 76 to 79 period time frame. From there on out, it's been all underground. But underground electric, this is one of the first places it was the first place that they ever did that. So, and there were a lot of firsts here. We saw one of the hardest winters that probably Wintergreen's ever seen in the winter of 76 and 77. And you're not going to believe this when I tell you this, and I don't blame you. But I saw a Devil's Knob at the Golf Maintenance Building I saw it 32 degrees below zero 2 nights in a row. But there were times here that it did not get above 10 degrees. The governor declared a state of emergency. The town of Front Royal had no running water. They brought water in on trucks, milk trucks, and it was like a third world country. You went down here and got a coffee pot and a jug, and you took that back to your house. We had pipelines freeze up in the ground here that were 3 feet deep because that's what we put them in. That's what our engineers said. That was typical. That's what you did in Virginia. Well, let me tell you, this is not Virginia. This is Pennsylvania. For every 1,000 feet that you go up, it's like 100 miles north. That was probably one of the worst things that we ever went through here because we had people that lived on Black Rock and they were out of water, just the same as, well, let me think. Somebody here is out of water right now that live in Richmond, yeah. And we had to do, it was unbelievable the things we had to do to get them water. But because of that, we learned a very hard lesson. And we started to listen to nature. We had those of us who were up here and dealing with this. It said, no longer are we going to put these water lines in at this depth. We're going to put these water lines in at 4 and 5 feet deep. Well, when we do that, then we get into real solid rock. And so the amount of dynamite that was used here over those first, I'd say, 5 years is unbelievable. And the one thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that during the whole time of construction that I was involved at Wintergreen and have been involved at Wintergreen, doing some of the really dangerous things that took place here, we never had a fatality. In this building, we had somebody that fell off the roof and hit the concrete right out here. We had people that fell off of High Ridge Place. We had falls that took place, and they were serious. We had a man that got seriously hurt testing water lines on the Highland ski slope. But there were no fatalities. All those people recovered. And that was knowing what I know about the danger that it was every day. We didn't think much of it. It just business was normal. So I could go on. I don't want to hold this up in terms of telling war stories because we could go on forever with this. But I guess that one thing I want to leave you with is the same thing that has been voiced here, that LF voiced, that while we sit here on the 50th anniversary and kind of look in the rearview mirror as to what we've accomplished and kind of pat ourselves on the back and say we've done a good job, it's important that those who are left here, those who are carrying the banner on from here, take it seriously. That Wintergreen is a very special place. You will not find another place like this, I don't believe, anywhere. It takes a lot of dedicated stewardship to keep this thing going. So I would leave you with this. It's what I used to tell the people that work for me about being very careful with what you do. Do not do anything to disturb nature. Do not do that. Stay inside, stay in your lane. If we clear a road and it's 40 feet wide, stay there. Do not get out in the woods. Don't eat your lunch in the woods. We've got to take care of the place. And I would say to you that if not us, then who? And that's all I've got to say.
Thanks, George. Thank you, George. Gunter Bowler served as the general manager from 1980 to 1998. And I feel so blessed to have worked with this man, and Wintergreen could not have been more fortunate to have this class act of a man be its GM for all these years. Gunter was trained in the Swiss Hotel School, and he brought those lessons and traits to Wintergreen, missing no details and holding himself and his employees to the highest of standards. Gunter didn't just know the names of all the employees here, he knew the names of everybody in their family and developed a personal relationship with all of them. Gunter was always omnipresent. You'd always see him walking around the resort with his Sherlock Holmes hat, which, by the way, I saw you wearing again today. And he'd pick up trash. And because of that, everyone who worked for him picked up trash. And it wasn't about the trash. It was Gunter just leading by example in terms of taking pride in the resort that we all worked at. And we all did, and we all followed his lead. And Gunter instilled that in everybody that worked with him. So Gunter, aside from putting up with me. What were your greatest challenges at the resort?
Thank you, Mark. First of all, it's hard to follow George.
Yeah, it is.
I
That's
do
true.
not have an exciting story as George has. But LF Payne hired me in 1980 and brought me and Joost to Wintergreen. And I can only say it was a pleasure working with LF. He kind of set the tone, painted the framework, and let us do our job. And the support I got from LF was just absolutely unbelievable and much appreciated. Okay. And in addition to having LF as a support, was the entire Wintergreen development team. There were people who did anything I needed. I got help, or I was convinced that it was not the right thing to do, which was very necessary. But after coming here, the marching order from LF were to provide property owners and resort guests year-round with a quality resort experience. That was kind of my marching order. And anytime I needed help, I know there was help I could count on, which was fantastic. One of the days that is most meaningful in my memory is the day that this building was opened, the Mountain Inn. Before then, for example, the front desk was located in what's now the Copper Mine restaurant. And if somebody made a reservation and arrived in the night when it was dark and was trying to figure out where Wintergreen is, they had a hard time. They had to find the breezeway and come up to the breezeway and get into the copper mine to find the front desk. It was extremely difficult, and it's led to people who were disappointed, and unfortunately, it was hard to fix until we got this building. Mountain Inn opened. It created a sense of arrival. It kind of told you when you drove up this mountain, now this is Wintergreen. There is this major building. And we had, of course, the facilities. The front desk now was in this building. The meeting spaces, like where we are sitting right now, was part of this new environment. We had the retail stores and everything to really present this as a resort. And now what we needed in addition was sales and marketing to make sure that people realize, as some people call it, there's that ski resort. Well, we didn't want to be the ski resort. We wanted to be a four-season resort. And one of the reasons that Mark Glickman came on board was to help us accomplish that people realize that there is a much more than just a ski resort. We had meeting space. We had hired a team, and I don't want to forget Tim Hess, who is sitting right over there. He was part of that team. We had to make sure that people understand you can have a good time at this resort. When do people come to resorts? On weekends, vacations, and for longer periods of time. To promote that, it takes a lot of work. And LF kind of pointed out how difficult it was to paint that picture in the general market to make sure that people understand what Wintergreen was all about. And Mark helped us and others on the sales and marketing team to make sure that we get business in here when we need it, since the visitors for the weekend and for the holidays, they were wonderful, and we appreciated them. But we needed also midweek business. Since you sit here in the middle of the week, there's nobody here. So then the sales and marketing efforts, including some of the stories that Mark has, brought business here other than strictly for weekends. And the day that Mountain Inn opened, it really opened the idea of having a full-fledged four-season resort. And as such, we were able to promote it and get business at times when we needed it to generate some cash flow. And that's the story.
Thank you, Gunnar. Now, our next guest, Doug Coleman. Just a quick little story about Doug. Don't get nervous, Doug. But when I came here to Wintergreen from New York, I had asked everybody at the New York Times, Travel and Leisure, have you ever heard of this place called Wintergreen Resort? Because I never had when LF hired me to come here. And they all said no. And I was like, okay, either there's something seriously wrong with this place or it's been under-marketed. But when I got here, I was trying to figure out what set Wintergreen apart from every other beautiful national resort in the country that had golf pros and tennis pros and lifeguards and everything else. And it was that guy right there, Doug Coleman, because there weren't many resorts in the country that had a full-time biologist, naturalist on staff that was doing plant and wildflower transplantations with its property owners and all the tremendous the national research that Doug was doing and still doing. It was just amazing. And we didn't think anybody else in the country could be doing that. And so we applied for the American Hotel and Motel Association that year was having its first ever National Environmental Quality Achievement Award. And we went for it, and with the help of Doug and Tony and LF and a lot of people, we did a presentation and we won that award. And that was the beginning of putting Wintergreen on the map. Now Wintergreen was known as one of the top environmental resorts in the country. And it had a reputation that it didn't have before. Before it was known as a regional ski resort and a real estate play. It didn't have a national reputation. But, before there was even green tourism, we were at the forefront of that. Whenever there was a story written about environmental stuff and resorts, Wintergreen was in every story because of what we were doing and because we had that award. And that award is what really led us to win other awards like Best Golf Resort in the country and Best Tennis, Top 50 Tennis Resort and Top Family Resort. And it all started with Doug and his program. And, as founder and executive director of the Nature Foundation at Wintergreen, Doug's been protecting the heritage and beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia for over 30 years now. And the book For the Love of the Land could really be Doug's autobiography because nobody loves this land more than Doug and has a passion for it more than Doug. And what he and the Nature Foundation are doing and being stewards of this beautiful resort and this beautiful land is really spectacular and something special. And you're all a part of it. And if you're not already, I encourage you to get up to the Wintergreen Nature Foundation, volunteer. This is a good time to be a part of some environmental efforts at Wintergreen. And Doug recently initiated the Natural Gardens of Wintergreen, which is a strategic effort to join the community together to support landscaping efforts that protect propagated native plant tissue collected in and around Wintergreen's 11,000 acres. And he has scientists up here that are doing climate change research and from the Smithsonian. I mean, it's just very, very impressive. And Doug, I'm going to let you share whatever you like, but I just want you to know that I'll be timing you. So go ahead.
Well, I'm glad I didn't hear the last comment. I when I came here in '76, I was kind of a nobody, but I was attracted by the vision of Don Faulkner. And when you have a 13,000 acre, as it was then, piece of property, and you are verbally committing to preserve over half of that in its natural state, that was unheard of for me. I mean, I grew up a farm kid and I knew about preserving things and loving the land and all of those things. But you have to remember that this was 1971 and it was several years before the Clean Water Act was passed. And so you had a dreamer and a developer who was making a verbal, non-written promise to preserve over half of that land as open space. And even today, I sort of feel, and a number of us feel the same way. And I just also want to say that there are a number of you in this room that have the right and ought to be sitting at this table because you have had a major impact on this, and it would not have happened without you. So I want to make that clear. But what I was doing in those days, I was attracted, and I became, I mean, it wasn't like a spiritual thing, but I got almost genetically connected to Don Faulkner through the thread of protecting over half of Wintergreen as open space. And when I first started, one of the first people that I ran into, and it was like running into a brick wall, was George Nicholas. And George is a big, tough Marine. And what George taught me very quickly is that all right, George, behave. If you're going to bring me an environmental problem, don't come to me unless you have a solution. There are too many people in this world that are problem-oriented and not enough solution-oriented. And so I never forgot that lesson. And I learned similar lessons from LF and Peter Farley and Gunter and all these old guard people sitting here in the room. But I knew when I first got involved how unique Wintergreen was. I knew that this development was occurring in a 4,000-year-old old-growth forest. I knew that there were ecosystems here that were probably globally ranked. I knew that. But the issue was that the concepts of conservation and development will always be a goal rather than an accomplishment necessarily. And I learned from marketing that, Coleman, you need to provide solutions, but you also need to be thinking about a way that the nature of Wintergreen can be marketed and how it can be marketed and how a realtor, how Tim Hess and Merrick and all the others and Farley could say with a level of confidence that this is unique in the world and it is unique in this country. So I guess deep down from the times that I went home thinking like a diamond and the times I went home thinking like a stone, when I would see a bulldozer go through a community, and we were rescuing plants in those days. But it was how to make this work in a way that brought really incredible accolades to a developer and a community who was trying to get it right. And you're watching other resorts go under, and Wintergreen was continuing to thrive, and sales were continuing. And you have to understand, in some of these early years, we didn't even have any amenities. I mean, we're selling, 50 years, 1975, the first soft open to ski season, and a lot of the golf courses weren't completed. Timing is everything. So what we were promoting was the nature of this place and the uniqueness of that. And we all, all of us sitting at the table, knew that Wintergreen was really a unique and special place. Not everybody knew exactly why. So I figured out a couple of things in those days. I figured out that, okay, Wintergreen's globally ranked environmental prowess is probable. I want to make it provable. And over time, as we worked, and I have to give credit to a lot of other people. Bob Evans couldn't be here. He was the first marketing person, helped me start the Wildflower Symposium. So many people deserve a lot of credit. But over time, as the scientists came in and began to work with me, and when the Nature Foundation formed, which the National Environmental Achievement Award was the start of the thinking toward becoming a foundation. But these scientists that came in and began to work with us, what happened is that what we all thought was probable became provable. And when Mark would throw me under the bus, bringing a marketing or writer here, who would look up at those condos on the ridgeline and say, how can you say you're environmentally sensitive? I can say, because of this. If we didn't have condos, we wouldn't have open space. And you need to understand that what we have protected is a provable, globally ranked ecosystem here. The Blue Ridge reaches its narrowest point through here. There's ag land on either side. It's a narrow corridor of old growth original forest. And that is the kind of thing that attracts the scientists to Wintergreen. It doesn't cost us because they're excited to be here. So I guess in closing, I would say that you don't have to ever wonder about whether or not Wintergreen's uniqueness is probable. It's provable. And it's been proved over and over again. We have fern beds here that are over 1,000 years old, like the aspen glen to the west. Unique as can be, but as I think, and I over my 2 minutes, but as I think forward, I think the underlying theme here, and I remember George Nicholas saying one time, the natural beauty that was here, we're not responsible for. It was here when we got here. But what we've been is a good steward of it, and we've come to understand why it's unique and why it's special. And somehow, you know, none of us live forever, except a few of us maybe, but we have to somehow continue to keep that thread alive as we go forward. Because there is no place in this country, and I've visited many resorts, there's no place like this. There's no place that I know of as a resort in this country. They may brag that they're next to a national forest and thousands of acres. But this is thousands of acres owned by you, and it is being stewarded by people who work with the Nature Foundation and you who support it. And we're at a point in time where we have a lot of support from Jay Roberts, who realizes the value of science, whether it's a pipeline or whether it's gypsy moth or all these things. And you have Jay Gamble, who I believe has read every page of that damn book. And he can quote it chapter and verse. But it's that thread that almost genetically ties us together, moving forward to keep this place as unique as it has been for the last 4,500 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. I didn't even have to cut you off, which is, I never heard Doug say the words in closing before, so this is a first. First for me. I'd like to introduce Peter Farley. Peter goes back to 1973 when he set up the sales office in the old Wintergreen Country Store at the intersection on 151, back when the roads up the mountain were a mud bath. He served in numerous roles over the years, president of the real estate company to being a member of the first Wintergreen Performing Arts Board. And Peter, you were here 50 years ago for the
52 years ago.
Or 52 is going to be my second guess. 52 years ago, but for the dedication of the resort?
Beg pardon?
For the opening of the resort with the governor?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, that day?
I was here that particular day, and I had an assignment. It was not too glorious at the time, but the featured speaker was the governor of Virginia, Mills Godwin, and we had a little bit of a problem. We had millions of problems with Wintergreen those days. One of the problems was, how do we get the governor to find this place on time so he could get to the podium to speak? And so I was sent to ride out with the governor and Mrs. Godwin. And so there, I pull up to the private airport where the private planes pull in. His plane comes in, his limousine meets him. I'm standing there. And they say, you go over here and get with these folks. And so Governor and Ms. Godwin are very gracious, kind people. And so they sit in the back of the limousine in a big, comfortable sofa. And they said, well, you sit on this jump seat that's a fold-down seat that's facing them and up 3 feet away from them. And Governor Godwin wanted to hear about Wintergreen. I mean, he had been sent some information by the marketing folks, and he had a prepared speech. And so we got involved. Of course, I'm explaining the wonderful features of Wintergreen to real estate clients most every day. And so the governor wanted to know all about it. What's unique about it? What's interesting? And we talked about the size, the 13,000 acres. Well, he's aghast. He's amazed by the size of it and the uniqueness, and so high on the mountain, and to bring utilities to this godforsaken place at the time, which was just like an impossibility. But he appreciated all of that, and so we talked on the way out. It takes an hour's drive to get here from the airport, and he comes in and he gets with LF and Gary Green, and they have a ceremony. Well, several days later, unbeknownst to me, he sends me a note, and I'm going to read it to you because it was pretty cool. I mean, he's a pretty cool guy. He says, "Dear Mr. Farley, I believe I was accused of giving you the 9th degree during our delightful visit to Wintergreen last week. If so, I hope it indicates in some measure my great interest in this impressive development and in the careful and sensitive way it is being handled," which is exactly what everybody else has been talking about, and it's totally unique. Anyway, he says, "Mrs. Godwin joins me in grateful thanks for your expert personal attention and warm best wishes, Mills E. Godwin, Governor." So anyway, that's my story.
Thank you, Peter. I must be doing a lousy job as moderator here because we're getting close on time here, but we started late, so I hope you'll bear with us and stay with us a little longer. I'd like to introduce Tim Hess now. Tim arrived from the Sea Pines Company on Hilton Head back in November of 1975 and is part of the opening resort team to hire and train the initial hospitality staff. And he also served as the food and beverage director for the next 6 years before joining the Wintergreen Real Estate Company in 1981. Tim, what was the greatest accomplishment of Wintergreen from your standpoint?
Well, I don't know if it's my accomplishment alone. What I think was the greatest accomplishment here is that there were a team of people that arrived at Wintergreen that believed that they could do anything. With the leadership of LF Payne and Larry Rutherford and Gary Green, people like that, they just said, we'll do it. And, you know, you've heard, what's your greatest challenge? Well, I'll tell you, when we opened this place, everything was a challenge. You know, you had to get food up this mountain when the road was terrible. You'd have to go down with 4-wheel drives and haul it back up. You'd have to go out. My lovely wife now, Lynn, would go out in a 4-wheel drive and pick up employees on these backcountry roads and hollows, haul them up here. We'd put them in a condominium so that they could work. And people like Tommy Holloway, which is right here, who's been a faithful friend and longtime opening guy here, would spend the night and, you know, work until the work was done. And I think, you know, what happened here was the energy that and the example that was given to me by LF and Larry and later on Gunter was just an incredible experience for me. I learned, they were my mentors. I learned so much from them. But I think the most exciting thing that we've seen here at Wintergreen is how the community has grown into a real community. We have activities and things that are taking place here, the Wintergreen Outdoor Club. We have a farmer's market where people from all over the county, sometimes 2 and 3 counties, show up down in the valley and integrate and enjoy each other, listen to music, and have a great time. So those are the things that I see that the community has accomplished as a group. But lastly, I would say the gentleman that's up on the left side of this screen, Michael Donovan made one of the greatest accomplishments happen that's ever happened at Wintergreen. He saved Wintergreen from being broken up and sold off into little pieces back in 1999. And had that, had that not happened, heavens knows what this place would look like. I'll tell you, we could have had people, all kinds of uncontrolled development with no common cause, no belief in what Don Faulkner and Doug Coleman have said about working in harmony with the environment. And it's been a life-changing thing for me. I'm one of the most lucky people to have a career of 50 years doing this with friends and colleagues like Pete Farley and Tim Merrick and all the guys that I've worked with here to do it with me. So that's my story.
Thank you, Tim. Our next guest is Ellen English, who is the longest full-time year-round resident at Wintergreen. Ellen worked in various food and beverage outlets and shops before becoming chef and associate innkeeper at the Trillium House from 1985 until it was sold to the Nature Foundation in 1999. For those of you that came after the transition, the Trillium House was an extremely successful country inn, and it was really a unique part of Wintergreen because just to have a country inn at a resort was unusual. And Helen's amazing food as chef there was the reason that thousands of people came and stayed at the Trillium House. She's a wonderful chef and that started her own catering business and doing very well. Ellen, why don't you share one of your favorite memories from either the Trillium House or the resort or both?
Well, one of the stories involves Cecilia Faulkner and Don Faulkner. Cecilia was getting married and Don insisted on using meats from his hunt club outside of Richmond. So he delivered venison that still had skin and hide on it, and duck, I believe, and bear meat. And I wasn't quite sure how to handle all that, but I found a Napier down in Stony Creek to help me saw up the venison and marinate it, and talked to a local bear hunter who coached me on using a pressure cooker to cook the bear, which turned out to have buckshot in it. And I had placed a large rental order. This was at the Red Barn at Rhodes Farm. And the rental company neglected to bring the grills, which were the primary source of cooking. So I sent staff to borrow grills from all the neighboring houses in Rhodes Farm so that we could cook their dinner. So that's a fun memory. Another one involves this distinguished gentleman next to me. Some of us had a scavenger hunt party, and we thought it would be fun to have kind of a ringer category. So we put on the list of things to find. If you could find Gunter Muller and bring him to the party with his Sherlock Holmes hat on, you got 100 extra points. I don't know that he remembers that, but someone found him and brought him to the party and got the 100 extra points. And I have a memory of, through the Dinwitties who owned the Trillium House, their connection to Don, being invited to go down to the pond to see the tigers. That story is in Mark's book, correct?
Yes, it is.
The filming of a movie or a documentary?
The most unrelaxing summer of my life. Yes, it's in the book. We had tigers and bears and all kinds of animals at Wintergreen. It was a Disney movie. A Disney producer had come to us about filming a movie that I wasn't sure was ever going to become a movie, but at the time NBC in New York was on strike, and so we were getting footage of little kids and animals, and I was feeding it to New York, and we were all over the news for filming this movie. But we had tigers, we had bears, and thank God we had Don Faulkner's pond that was off the beaten track, so I didn't have to get resort guests too close to any of the. I don't care how many times the trainer tells you a tiger's trained, you don't want a bunch of resort guests around it. And as the management team used to tell me, Mark, we don't have tiger insurance, so be careful with what you're doing here. But anyway, back to you.
Oh, well, there's so many parties, stories to tell. But one was putting a keg of beer on the back of a golf cart with Dave Reinhardt and finishing that off the day after a party.
That sounds believable.
Yeah. Overall, I'd say, besides all the natural beauty and recreation opportunities and the wildlife, it's been, the friends made, the connections built, the sense of community that's kept me here all these years. I love all the little threads that run through between so many of us. And yeah, great to see everybody here today.
Thanks, Ellen. Mary Buford Hitz is the author of the truly wonderful book, For the Love of the Land, A History of the Wintergreen Community, which if you haven't read it yet, please do not pass go and read it. It's tremendous. It's the story of the development of Wintergreen, which is not an easy story to tell. And Mary spent countless hours of research on interviews and meeting with Doug Coman and Don Faulkner and George Nicholas and Gunter and Peter. But as Mary states in her book, she spent the most time with Doug, who she gives the lion's share of credit to. And I think just for spending all that time with Doug, that Mary deserves the Pulitzer Prize for the love of the land. So I wish I were in a position to give that to you, Mary. But talk to us about what amazed you in the process of writing this book.
LF mentioned that it was an amazing process and an amazing place. First of all, if you look at it from a rational point of view, the sheer audacity of even thinking of a resort that was environmentally focused on top of a over 3,000-foot mountain is just crazy. And that amazed me. But almost a funny thing is the amazement that Don Faulkner tried to convince a blind man, Jim Wheat, to take on the challenge. And even funnier, that he did take it on. And in writing the book, I was amazed at the fact that we almost went through three bankruptcies, but the life-saving help at the last minute in very complicated deals avoided bankruptcy was truly amazing. And I think the blossoming of the Nature Center under Doug is something that you've understood from the other speakers and from Doug himself is crucial to what makes this even more amazing, beyond even the original vision of Don Faulkner or Jim Wheat. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mary. I'd like to introduce Jay Gamble, who's been the general manager at Wintergreen for the past 4 years, bringing his 44 years of industry experience at resorts such as Killington, Vermont, and Sunday River in Maine. Well, now that Doug said that you've read and know every word in the book, why don't you start with chapter 1 and start reciting it? No, I'm just kidding. Jay, why don't you tell us what compelled you and your wife to build a house at Stony Creek and move here full time?
Thank you, I will. But first, let me quote the book. One of the most amazing things at Wintergreen is that there's water on the top of this mountain. It is an amazing engineering feat. Everybody over there who was part of it understands it's one of the ninth wonders of the world right here at Wintergreen. And that's on page 71 through 73 of the book. But I'm from the Southeast, and I thought I would leave a flatland cotton farm in South Carolina and be a ski bum for a couple of years and go to Killington, Vermont. But that was 44 years ago, and I might be running out of time to get a real job in my life. But what really drew us to Wintergreen is that it is different from all other resorts. And it's not just that it's an upside down mountain. That's part of it. But most resorts, the resort came first. The resort was the business, and the resort needed a bed base developed around it to support the business. At Wintergreen, the original master plan was one of a community that would have a resort, 4 seasons embedded within it for the homeowners. And of all the places I've traveled skiing, the US West, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Switzerland, France, Austria, I would say that there is no place that I've ever been that there's a sense of community like there is at Wintergreen, and it goes back to the original master plan that was embraced and developed by everybody in this room today. And it makes Wintergreen a most unique and special place, the sense of community that we are. That's my story.
Thanks, Jay. And now I'd like to introduce the other Jay in the room, Jay Roberts. I love this guy. He started around the same time as I did, and he started in 85. I started in 86. Jay was destined to be at Wintergreen. He used to come here as a kid. And then in 1985, 86, he started working here and worked with our ski area manager at the time, Yul Gardner, who took him under his wings and gave Jay the opportunity to learn the business from the inside out. And just a quick funny story about Jay. I did a promotion. We had hired Robert Wren, who had just won the Buick Open, to be our touring pro when we opened the Stony Creek golf course. He almost set a PGA record for the lowest score. And I had an idea to, because of the 10 to 15 degree temperature difference from the top of the mountain to Stony Creek, to come up with a promotion that says you can ski in the morning and play golf in the afternoon for the price of a lift ticket. And to promote that, and because Robert Wren never won another tournament again the whole time he was our touring pro, in fact, I don't even think he made a cut. I had to do something for the guy. And I had him hit the world's longest golf drive off the top of a ski slope. I called Guinness in England to see if anybody had ever done it, and nobody ever had. So we put Robert Wren and our other pros, David Jimenez and Chris Waring, and had them try to break the record, which I knew they would because nobody had ever done it. But Jay was the head of the ski patrol, and we didn't know how far anybody was going to hit a golf ball off of the snow on top of a ski slope. We had no idea how far the ball would go. But we had Jay about halfway down Eagle Swoop with a walkie-talkie so we could tell him when they were going to hit the ball. We were using orange balls so we could measure it. And Jay called up on his walkie-talkie and he said, "Did he hit it yet? Did he hit it yet?" And as he's saying that, the ball is literally almost hit him between the eyes. It just sailed right over his head. And I, again, took a big deep breath that one of my promotions almost killed somebody with a golf ball. Be a tough one to explain that somebody died from a golf ball from the world's longest golf drive off of a ski slope. But anyway, Jay, you have a lot of memories here, and you're doing great things right now in your role. But what's one of your favorite memories of Wintergreen so far?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a golf ball.
Yeah, I know that.
That was one of those, ooh, what have I got myself into? Favorite memories. I think it's important when you go back to 1980, I was 9 years old. So all the things that you've heard thus far from my distinguished group of seniors, being the youngest guy here, I wasn't thinking about those things. And I would encourage you to recognize that your grandkids aren't thinking about those things. And for the folks in the room that started here as a kid, this place was magic. It was so different than Richmond. It was so different than DC. The environment mattered, but it mattered on a different level. We weren't interested in saving it. We were interested in exploring it. And what was so different here was you could get on one of Warren Griffin's buses after spending the night at the Vistas condos, and you were free. You were loose. You walked out. You got on it. You came down to the Mountain Inn. You had pizza at what was it called? The confectionery. All right. Yeah. Those opportunities to go into what was the Wintergreen store with Fred and Sabine, Hodgepodge, and Fred and Sabine would argue over your sandwich, right? I mean, God, that was magic. And I would show up for, by that point, I was probably 17, 18, 19 years old. And Sabine would say, no sandwiches today. And Fred would say, give Jay a sandwich. And she'd say, no sandwich, I'm not making any more sandwiches. They would argue back and forth, and the macaroni salad. But, as a kid, I was going to Faulkner's Pond, just checking it out. We would go with the dog and throw sticks, and it was close enough, but it was a world apart. And, Yule Gardner was here then. It was those opportunities where we opened the door of epistemology and member kids would climb in and we would take them for rides. I was one of those kids. I was a kid that got in and got hooked. And, God bless him, that was his name tag, head snowblower. It provided an opportunity that was so unique and different that it became special, and it gets at your core. So, Doug was a young man then. I was just a kid at Robin's Nest. I was in the Trillium House as a guest with my parents. We'd stay there. And later on, I ended up working nights with Ellen English when she would call and she'd have an event. I might be seen washing dishes or bussing tables. The Lynn Tylers, the Richard Hatch, all those people that came before us, the opportunities for the presidential visits. Remember when Clinton was here? He was here twice, maybe 3 times. I mean, what a feat. It's ski season, and Mark comes forward and says, we're going to invite the president here in the Democratic caucus. We had the president of the United States here in ski season. It was like this. It was an absolute disastrous fun. Right? I mean, everything about that was just so magical that you pull it off afterwards and go, can you believe we had the leader of the free world here on a ski season? And it was like this outside. So, I fell in love with it different than Don Faulkner did, because I was too young to really appreciate what he appreciated. So it's unique for me to be at my age now thinking about trying to make payroll, and what it was like working at a resort when I started here. I wasn't worried about payroll. We were skiing the Highlands the day it opened. We were all those places. So those stories from way back when, remember the young side of that. Remember how special this place is for the younger folks, because they're here. Peter's kids are here. And Pete here, you still here? There he is. I knew him when he was misbehaving with Lynn Tyler's son and Dan Schablein's son, and he grew up here and he knows how magical it is. It was incredibly special. So, yeah, I got too many memories to list, but very fortunate to still be here.
Thank you, Jay. John Coy was elected to the Wintergreen Partners Board in 2006, and he served on the board until 2015. He became chairman of the board in 2008, and he also served on the Nature Foundation Board and 8 elected years on the Wintergreen Property Owners Association Board, and as its president for 2 years, from 2018 to 2020. And currently serves as president of the newly formed Wintergreen Community Foundation. John, I know you've been here through some good times and bad times, but this is a celebratory day, so Give us some memories of the good times and not the bad times.
Yeah, in light of that, Mark, I'd like to defer my time to the gentleman, Mr. Michael Donovan, who I think probably has some more positive stories to tell than I might.
Okay. All right, Michael, I don't know if I could give you a better introduction than Tim Hess did about saving
Well,
the resort. But
I don't
Michael
know
Donovan's
why
been
John is
Michael Donovan's been
deferring.
instrumental in helping to fund a variety of vital institutions here and in an effort to preserve the character of Wintergreen, and served on the WPI board for 6 years. So Michael, why don't you share with us some of your favorite memories of Wintergreen? And I just want to say it's good to see you again. It's been a few years.
Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but John has been far more involved for far longer than me. But Linda and I shared 25 wonderful years living at Wintergreen. I enjoyed being on the board. I enjoyed working with Tim and the real estate company when we sort of bailed it out. And all I can say, I think it's all been said, it's a unique place. And I was privileged to be part of it. Thank you.
Well, actually, I've done pretty good on time. It's 3:40, and we said it was going to go from 2 to 3:30. But we have really happy to have two of Don Faulkner's children here, Mac and Cecilia, and they both grew up in Wintergreen. And Cecilia's still working here. And as she reminded me, we worked together when she was with the ski patrol. I wasn't on the ski patrol, but I worked with the ski patrol. But anyway. Take turns. Mac, you want to go first, share a couple memories, and Cecilia?
Sure. I'm certainly grateful to be here and to see everybody here. I first came to Nelson County with my dad in 1968 when he was trying to list a big survey. And I spent a lot of time with my dad in those years, going to where he was, farm and land broker, going to different pieces of real estate that he was marketing, but there was nothing like the big survey. We remember, Dad mentioned Margaret Garth and Tuckahoe Tavern. I remember spending nights there and the delicious food that Margaret Garth served. Country fare. Remember, going up the road. The road that when there's the initial mountain road up to the top of the mountain. In my dad's Jeep Wagoneer, he had a winch. So if you got stuck, a winch where you could get yourself out, and that happened a number of times. We spent a lot of time here as teenagers skiing, but also we had some land adjacent to Wintergreen where we camped out and had just some great family times and times with friends. And I just want to, I guess in closing, just say I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with all the folks today, and appreciate the vision.
Thank you, Matt.
And appreciate the vision that my dad had that allowed for the enjoyment of this land, for so many people and for times to come. Thanks.
Thanks so much, man.
Dad, we're proud of you.
Thanks for being here with us. Celia, you went?
I'm here right now to honor my dad, who, we all know Wintergreen wouldn't be if it wasn't for him. Also, want to just give a little shout out to my mom, who did a pretty darn good job of raising us 3 kids so much on her own, because, my dad was up here a lot, and for good reason. Also, I'm so glad I had such a good opportunity to talk to Doug today and read his bio. And I'm really grateful to Doug for making sure that my dad's dream of, ensuring that his love of the land remained and is fulfilled, and that most of Wintergreen, of the old big survey and more, is with no housing. It's just green in here for all of us, and the future. And I do thank all of you for being here and what you've all done to keep Wintergreen going. It's also really fun to be back in this position. I've mostly been back recently as a ski instructor year after year after year after year, which I love. I mean, ski season is my favorite time of the year, even though I do love summers at the beach, don't get me wrong. Today, seeing people that I, knew as a kid, the realtors that, it's like, oh gosh, all those cool realtors when I was a kid. And here they all are. And it's really nice to see you guys again. And Ellen English, yeah, we could go on about that. Our wedding was super fun, and Ellen had a lot to do with that. It's also just so incredibly touching to see friends that I've known since I first started skiing here as a ski instructor in 1984. Started skiing here in 1975, but except for 7 years, for good reason, some of those out west teaching, I've been teaching skiing here since 1984. And our brother Jim, who's in South Carolina right now, started along with me when he was first year at UVA. So anyway, that's my story. There's lots more.
Yeah, I'm sure there
That's
is.
some for now. And thanks.
Thanks so much, Cecilia, and thanks for being here. I just want to thank everybody again for taking time out of your day. That's the program for today. There's 50 is a big number, isn't it? And,
Mark, excuse me. I deferred my time. I didn't give it up.
Oh, hey, back to John. All right.
Let's hear more from you.
Back to John.
I'm sorry. Mark told you who I am, and I think Mary alluded to 3 near bankruptcies, and I had the unfortunate part of being part of the Wintergreen board for 2 of them. What I guess it showed me, in having gone through that, is the tremendous spirit of this membership, of the people who do love the land. And not only the people who sit in this room, but the property owners. When the bank in 2008 told us they were pulling all of the loans, which we had on the books, which was $12.5 million, we were in desperate shape. The only option we had that we came up with that was reasonable was to put out a private offering to our membership to raise $7.5 million, which we did. What I was amazed at is we knew people who had the ability to help out in that. What I didn't realize is the people who would see me at the Devil's Knob and say, can I write a check to you? And it was all of those kinds of people who walked forward, who made it possible for us to retire our bank loan. We had a conservation easement, which gave us a considerable amount of money, which allowed us to take out the entire bank loan. So we were on our way again until in 2013, 2014, we had a very bad ski season. The state informed us that the conservation credit wasn't worth what it was and wanted another $3 million back. And the bank pulled our line of credit. And we are in very difficult shape again. So we said we can't go to the membership because we've been to that well once before. And we knew exactly pretty much what we needed to do because we still had $7 million in debt to our members through the private offering. And so we brought in a group to help us work through the process. We were just about in the throes of walking into a bankruptcy court when I got a call one night from the Greenbrier. Somebody said, are you still interested in selling the resort? And we said, we have no choice. We'd rather do that than go into bankruptcy and not know who's going to buy it coming out.
And they said Mr. Justice was interested in buying the resort. We said, okay. And they said, well, the term in bank, I guess the term in these things is put your pencils down, don't talk to anybody else. And the next morning, Hank Teese called me at 6:30 in the morning, who was the executive director, and said, come down to my office. And we came down to the office, and there was a handwritten business check signed by Mr. Justice for $1 million. Now, I say that not because it's great news, but it was. Much like the previous bankruptcies, had we not had that type of response, our destiny, we say, was out of our hands. I would commend the Pacific Group, commend Jay and his team for making our membership, I think, very dynamic, very exciting, and I think all of us have a lot to be thankful for the spirit that you bring to the table as members of this organization. And I thank Jay and the Pacific Group for recognizing the value of that membership. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I'm going to just have Jay Gamble come up and do a few closing remarks here. So you don't have to come up yet. You're on microphone.
How about from right here? First, I want to thank everybody who is in the room today. We really appreciate you turning out. We started planning this back in the summer when Mark and I had breakfast in Charlottesville, and we talked about this 50th and what can we do to really create like a family reunion, like a homecoming weekend. And I said, can you get LF to come? Thank you. Appreciate you coming. And I appreciate everybody who's coming. And you see everything around the room. Everything has been filmed. There are 3 cameras. There's audio. And we're going to try to save this for posterity. We're going to find a way, maybe working with Jay to put it on your site or our site. We haven't gotten that far yet, but we're going to keep this and make it available. But I really want to thank Mark Glickman for everything you did to make it come together.
It was fun.